Hi, welcome everybody to the Free and Equal Network. My name is Christina Tobin. I'm the founder and chair of the Free and Equal Elections Foundation. We're a 501c3 nonprofit whose mission is to broaden electoral choices through education and direct positive action. We're going to be hosting our fourth United We Stand Fest this April 29th at Texas A&M University, the Reed Arena, on April 29th. And we have one of our big supporters of Free and Equal. I've been very fortunate to get to know Ed, really even mostly in the recent months. We have Mr. G. Edward Griffin, a world-renowned expert on the monetary reserve, amongst many other topics, but we'll be addressing the monetary reserve. He is the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island, a book that my dad put in my lap at 13 years of age. So you can imagine, really, to me, an American hero he is. G. Edward Griffin, welcome to the Free and Equal Network.
Well, thank you. I'm not only here, but I'm sure your viewers can hear outside my door. Just 1 minute before this broadcast, the tree trimmers showed up with their big crushing machine. Hopefully it will not last more than a minute or two. But yes, thank you. Here I am also, if you can hear me. And it's a delight to be here, Christina.
Oh, it's a delight to have you, Ed. And our viewers, I've been getting a lot of emails. They're pretty excited to hear from you today. And any of you there that are listening, please feel free to ask any questions you may have for Ed. But Ed, for our listeners out there that are like, who's G. Edward Griffin? American hero? What's The Creature from Jekyll Island? Can you elaborate your background, who you are, and what you stand for?
Well, yes. How many hours do we have? When you asked that question, Christina, I had to laugh because my mind raced back to about 1975. It was just shortly after my book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, was published. So I was on the speaker circuit, right? And some group had booked me into a theater in some small town. So I show up and I look up at the marquee in the theater and it says, G. Edward Griffin, The Creature from Jekyll Island. And I don't know if that brought any people out or not, but it probably would have brought out more than just G. Edward Griffin. But anyway, yeah, good question. Who am I? Well, I'm just a writer. And I say that in all honesty. It's not pretended humility. It's real. I'm just a writer. I'm a guy that has a lot of curiosity about things. And I like to research them. And then I'm kind of slow. People say, you're kidding. I'm pretty slow to get things. But when I get them, I usually have that aha moment. Like, I get it. Why didn't they say so? You know, how I'm sure a lot of people do that. So I've spent a lot of my life just trying to convert that aha moment into the, well, why didn't they say so part, you know, and trying to rework it and get all the garbage out and get down to the simple basics. That's what I do. I'm a researcher and I'm a writer and I'm a student, a perpetual student. I learn so much every day. But I primarily am drawn to topics, Christina, that I think have a profound impact on our lives. Things that are big. And that doesn't mean I'm not interested in little things, because I'm fascinated by a lot of little things. I have my hobbies and all of that, but those are all put aside now because I know that there are things in our lives that really are threatening our ability to enjoy the little things. Big things are blooming around us, our very survival as a free people. And in parts of the world where freedom perhaps was never well established, it means absolute survival, period. I mean, the human race is in danger as being what it's supposed to be, in my view. I think the most endangered species on the planet is the free human being. So I developed, I shouldn't say developed, but I discovered early on when I was about 28 years old, I guess, 27, I discovered that I had a crusader gene.
Crusader. I've never heard that.
Well, I didn't know that because up until that time, I was just a young fellow with a small family, and I was climbing the corporate ladder and all of that. I thought I was. And all of a sudden, I started to find out about things that were going on in the world that affected my future and my country, my community, and all of humanity. And I found myself being, I surprised myself. I was concerned about these things. Not ever before had I thought about anything beyond my own life, my own future, my own family, and so forth. So, make a long story short, I quit my job with a large insurance company, and I started on my own. I started to give lectures, and I wasn't writing in those days. I was just giving lectures because when I went to school, I majored in speech and communications. I was one of those intolerable little kids. I was a child actor in Detroit, of all places, acting in radio. That was Detroit in those days was the home of the Lone Ranger, for example,
Wow.
and the Hermit's Cave, and the Ford Theater, and all those things. Well, whenever they needed some little kid to say, "Hey, Dad, here come the Indians," or whatever they were supposed to say, I was among that little pool of maybe 6 or 8 kids that they called on. So I did a lot of radio in those days. And so naturally, when I went to school, this was my career. I wanted to go into speech and communications, and so I did. I worked my way through school as a radio announcer at WUOM and University of Michigan. I came out of school. I got a job with WWJ TV, which was one of the first really large, well-equipped television stations in the country. And I was an assistant manager or a director, which was a glorified title for a floor manager. I pulled cables and threw cues and things like that. And went in the military. I'm giving you all these boring details. Went in the military, and I wound up doing a lot of work with the service clubs. I went in there to radar. I was teaching radar. I learned radar systems and repair, and then they made me a teacher. And then I ran in one day on the base. I ran into a colonel who I had known in civilian life as an agent there at the TV station. He says, "Hey, Ed, what are you doing?" I told him I was teaching radar maintenance. He said, "You're wasting your time. I need you over here at service clubs." I said, "Well, are you kidding? They just spent a lot of money and a lot of time teaching me how to make radar systems work, and you think you can get me over there?" He said, "Yeah, I got some pull." So first thing you know, next week, I'm over there as his assistant, handling all the service clubs. There were, I think, 3 of them on base at Fort Bliss, Texas. And then about 2 weeks later, he got transferred to the swamps of Louisiana. And I was more or less left there in charge of this bloody thing. And so that's how I fought the war. I had a most cushy job. I didn't seek it. I was embarrassed to tell anybody that's what I was doing, but that's what I did. And in that process, the reason I'm telling you this is that I put on a show, which you might call a USO show, and Raymond Burr was the star. And he came through, and it was my job to set up all the props and do the promotion and get the amplifier systems working and get the audience there. So I met Raymond Burr, and afterwards that night we were sitting in the bar having a beverage, and he says, "Well, when you get out of this man's army, Ed, why don't you come up and see me in Hollywood? I got some important people I'll introduce you to." Well, that was music to my ears. So here we go. I finally got out of the service, and I went to Hollywood, and I looked up Raymond Burr, called him on the phone. "Hey, Ray, this is Ed Griffin." Silence. He said, "Who?" I said, "Ed Griffin. Remember the tour?" "Oh, yeah. How are you, Ed?" "I'm fine." "Well, you said I should come out." Okay. Well, we had lunch. He had hardly any memory, no interest in me. But there I was. That was the end of that, my big connection. And there I was in Hollywood. So I found out, Christina, that there were a lot of more talented people than I there, washing cars and bussing tables. But this time I've got a wife, I've got a child, and I needed a job. So I got out of all of that, and I went into the real corporate world, and that's where I started my story. I didn't give you the backstory. That's how I got there in Los Angeles and why I was with an insurance company. So when I quit my job with the insurance company, I decided, okay, I've got all this background in communications and that sort of thing, so I'll start to produce some films. Had no money, had no investors, so I just started to bootstrap it. I borrowed some money, and I produced a little 16 millimeter film, black and white, with myself sitting on a stool in my living room with a little audience there, and I gave my lecture. We filmed it, and that's how the whole thing started. So that was the beginning of my company, which was American Media, Inc. I've been producing documentary films ever since, and I discovered that I could write. I didn't know that That's another story in itself. It's not important, but I was sure I could not write. But I became very ill, and I wasn't able to get out anymore. So somebody offered me a contract to write a book on some of the things I'd been talking about. And I remember saying, oh, I can't write, or thinking I was going to say it. And I got right up to the point, and I said instead, oh, yeah, no problem, because I needed the money. And that's the only reason I took the contract. And then I discovered, hey, I can write. And I enjoyed it.
Boy, can you. How many copies have you sold of just The Creature from Jekyll Island alone?
Well, I don't know, because there have been quite a few foreign language editions too, and I don't know the numbers, but I'm going to guess it's not quite 1 million, but it's coming pretty close to it altogether.
Wow.
So it's amazing for that kind of a book. It's a big, thick 600-page book. Nobody wants to read those kinds of books.
I have a copy of it across the room, so I don't know about that, but I almost want to get up and run and grab it and show it to people on the screen. I might do that.
Thank you. But anyway, they're I'm going to say about 1 million, and then copies of my lectures have been made and pirated. We encourage people to make copies of them. And I'm going to guess it's no scientific measurement, I'm going to guess about 5 million people have heard that lecture on The Creature from Jekyll Island. So it's getting out there.
Far more about to. We got a really beautiful comment here from James. Thank you. He says, Mr. Griffin, your lucid and entertaining explanation of a game of Bailout and Creature should be required reading for all citizens, especially those who vote. It was an eye-opener for me and made sense of some of the baffling, frustrating development in our economy, which I had noticed and even cursed, but didn't understand until then. Thank you. And that's such a sweet comment, and I could not agree with him. I wholeheartedly agree with him. That is, the Federal Reserve, created in 1913, it's not federal, right? It's private. What is it for people that are like, what the Federal Reserve note? I know it was created simultaneously when the income tax was created. Money printed maybe out of thin air, fractional reserve. For those who have no idea, which there are a lot of people, but they will have an idea because of individuals like you. Could you tell us just at the root in a condensed version in a few minutes what The Creature from Jekyll Island is, that book, which I'm going to grab. So I have to.
Nice of you to do that, Christina. So while you're off screen, I'll just start by saying Federal Reserve is indeed a strange creature. I should explain why the title. Oh, you've got the book now? I
do. This is it. The Creature from Jekyll Island, you guys. So if you want to be that 2, 3, 5 million.
Turn it sideways and scare everybody.
All right, is that readable? Yeah, The Creature from Jekyll Island. So
if you don't like it, if you don't like the book, folks, it makes a great doorstop.
Hardly, but you're too modest. Ironically, I have a little bookmark in it from the Dalai Lama in it. Yeah, right. Go figure, huh? So, but please. Well,
The Creature. First of all, I guess I should explain why The Creature from Jekyll Island is the title for a book on the Federal Reserve System. And in a way, that helps to explain what the Federal Reserve System is, because Jekyll Island is a real island, as you know, Christina. But most people didn't. I didn't know that Jekyll Island was a real island, but it is, and it was back in 1910 when all this action began. It was a resort island. It was privately owned by a very small elite group of bankers and industrialists from Wall Street, people like J.P. Morgan and William Rockefeller and their friends and associates. They owned this island, and it was actually a club. They called it the Jekyll Island Club, and it was a resort where those very wealthy families from New York went to escape the cold winter months. They went down to Georgia, and it was off the coast of Brunswick, Georgia, and it's a beautiful island. You can visit it today. In fact, I've been there 3 times now, maybe 4, can't remember. And you can visit those beautiful homes that the super wealthy called them cottages, but they were mansions, and they were summer cottages for these folks. And the center of their social activity was a very elegant clubhouse and it's still standing, been very well maintained, now owned by the Marriott, by the way. The whole island is now owned by the state of Georgia, and it's a place where tourists go, and they go. You can ride around in these horse and carriages and see the lifestyle of the rich and famous, or at least the rich. Some of them weren't so famous back in 1910. Well, anyway, the point is that's where, in that clubhouse, is where the Federal Reserve System was actually created, which is a curiosity in itself. Why would something as important as the charter for the American banking system be created on Jekyll Island? And that's what really caught my attention, because my first foray into reading this history revealed that the people who went there were very secretive about it. There was really, without exaggeration, to say it was one of the most secret meetings of all history. These men went to great lengths to make sure that nobody knew about it. And then they threw up a lot of decoys so that if they started to investigate, they'd come to the wrong conclusions.
Who did these men consist of?
Well, they were the primary representatives of the banking industry. They were, they were representatives of J.P. Morgan, for example. Right. He wasn't there, but all of his second lieutenants were there, and he was giving directions from behind the scenes, but he didn't physically go. But Morgan had the largest bank in New York. He had a lot of insurance companies, had the Bankers Trust Company, and the executives of his primary institutions were there. Representatives of Kuhn Loeb Company, which represented the Rothschild banking dynasty in Europe. I mean, the big guys were all there. In those days, there was a lot of public concern over what they called the banking trust, the money trust. That's what the little short term they gave it. If you read the letters to the editor and the editorials in the New York Times of that era, you find over and over again references to break the grip of the money trust. We got to break the money trust, because people understood that in those days, even these small collection, this consortium of huge, monstrous financial institutions in New York were astride the whole economy. They could determine who got the credit and who didn't, and they could influence interest rates, and they just had a tremendous amount of power. And if you were in the club, you did very well. If you were out of the club and they didn't like you for whatever reason, that they were trying to take over your business, for example, and wanted you in financial distress so they could buy you up for pennies on the dollar, well, then you had financial problems and your businesses had to struggle. And the first thing you know, you were up for sale. And that's how things were going in those days, and still do, by the way. But it was maybe a little more obvious in those days. So anyway, a little bit off the track, but the people that went to this meeting were the money trust, actually. They represented the money trust. And we don't have time to go into who they were and all that, but there was one Senator Nelson Aldrich. All the rest were directly in the banking industry. Aldrich he was a senator, but he was business partners with them. And his family was banking and so forth. So it was a banking meeting in essence. And that is where they went to meet in private in that clubhouse. And they sat around that table for a week, and they hammered out all the details of the Federal Reserve System. And there was a rather dramatic and famous train ride. Well, it's famous now because I think of my book. It made it famous, but it was certainly dramatic when I discovered it. The way these guys met at the railroad station in Hoboken, and they were told to come separately, not to be seen together, not to talk to newspaper reporters. One of them carried a big black shotgun and a shotgun in a big black case. So in case someone had asked him, "Where are you going, sir?" he was going to say, "Well, I'm just going on a duck hunting trip." We find out from his children and his biographer who wrote about this. The duck hunters.
Yeah. Picture from Jekyll Island, the duck hunters.
Yeah, this guy, it wasn't even his shotgun. He never fired a gun in his life. He borrowed it just so he could carry it as a decoy. He said, we're going hunting.
A facade. They were carrying a facade.
It is a facade. And of course, for years after that, these men denied that any such meeting ever took place. And finally, after the Federal Reserve was established and became highly revered as a great American institution, Then and only then did these guys come out and say, "Oh yeah, we did have the meeting. We just thought it was a good idea to keep it secret." And then they began to boast about the part they played, and it became kind of funny because they seemed to be competing with each other to claim who was the most influential at this meeting. Okay, all of that is just background history. And when I came across that, I thought, well, when you hide something, if someone does something in secret, there's usually something to hide. And I wanted to know, what were they hiding? And that was what triggered me. And so that's how I began my book, with that train ride to Jekyll Island. And once you understand what happened there, then all the pieces, really every important piece of the puzzle, is already in place. For example, what were they trying to hide? Well, it's very simple. In fact, one of them wrote about it in the Saturday Evening Post in later years. That was during the bragging period now. So that's when they came out of the woodwork and said, yeah, we did this and this is why. It was an article he wrote in the Saturday Evening Post. And he says, well, we did this because we were writing a banking reform bill. And if the world had known that the banking industry that they were trying to reform was writing the bill, it would never have passed in Congress. And that's about as blunt as you can make it. And he said it just about like I did. He said it would never have passed through Congress. So they had to keep it a secret. And people still to this day do not know that the banking laws, particularly the Federal Reserve Act, have been written by the bankers themselves. And it's not written by the people. It's not there to protect the people from the bankers. It's to protect the bankers from the people. See? So in a short way, that answers your question. What is the Federal Reserve System? It is a banking cartel. Look it up in the dictionary. Cartel is a group of apparently competing companies who have agreed not to compete. They form a cartel agreement, which is that we won't compete. You produce this, I'll produce that. We'll all charge the same price. We'll share patents and processes. We come together. So eventually we act like we're one giant company, even though we have components within it which are separately owned. But in essence, all they've done is created a shared monopoly where there's no competition allowed. Because with competition, of course, the consumer benefits. But without competition, the manufacturer or the provider of services benefit. So the answer to your question after all of that is that the Federal Reserve System is a banking cartel. It was formed on Jekyll Island in November of 1910. It was passed into law just before Christmas in 1913. And it's a banking cartel. The federal government has nothing to do with it except to charter it. Like you go to your state and say, here's a corporation we want to form. We want you to issue a charter. So they created the Federal Reserve Act, which really was not anything more than a banking cartel agreement. If you could imagine in your mind taking a big eraser and erasing off the top of the paper where it says cartel agreement, get rid of that and then write in Federal Reserve Act. That is essence what happened. And so it was passed into law. And unfortunately, the American people didn't understand any of this. And so we are living now in the wake of that, which means that we are being ruled and all of our financial transactions are being controlled by a banking cartel. And we don't even know who these people are and how it works and have no interest in it.
Which gets, I mean, I definitely have to just say, for those of you who have not read this, please do. The Creature from Jekyll Island. And you'll see on the back here an endorsement from Dr. Ron Paul. A superb analysis. Be prepared for one heck of a journey through time and mind. And this guy named Willie Nelson, have you heard of him? Pretty rockin' musician, scary, he said, Willie Nelson. It's a story of the world banking system. Enough said. And so I see Robert Kiyosaki. I know he's going to be, well, I want to talk about the Red Pill Expo. You're going to be having this June 22nd through 23rd in Spokane, Washington. But before we get to that, and I want to definitely plug your domain as well, I wanted to really kind of go more into the direction of now for people who are familiar with your work or not familiar, they're familiar now, but people who are familiar, let's dive into the into the Federal Reserve note and the cryptocurrency world. I recently saw you in Acapulco. We went to Acapulco. You were a speaker there this year. I go to a lot of events, from anarchists to socialists to down the middle, to understand the perspectives, because in order to bring people together, it is important for me to have that communication, that interaction, and knowledge. So I got to see you there and hang out with you at the airport for like 3 or 4 hours, while so many people want to take photos of you and all. And it was just like cool to really bond with you one-on-one mostly. We really went into the world of the Federal Reserve note, yes, being money made out of thin air. I see Bob here on social media said paper backed by nothing, money printed out of thin air. Yes, definitely. What is your feeling about what's going on in the crypto world, seeing that you were at the Nexus Earth conference last year at Aspen Institute, who is the co-host, as I mentioned at the beginning of this interview, of our 4th United We Stand event, Free and Equals hosting at Texas A&M this April 29th. I'd like to get your a little bit of analysis and kind of dig a bit on that. And if anybody has questions, feel free to, again, on social media, I see you there. Joseph just wrote, "Beaming sunlight conversations, love resonance." That's sweet.
Great, yeah. Yeah, resonance, that's a wonderful thing. If you're in tune with it, it can tear down buildings and bridges, of course, if you're not on the right side of it. Okay, well, that's
we're building
really
bridges here.
Yeah, currencies and cryptocurrencies and fiat currencies and gold-backed currencies, all those things. It's an important topic. In fact, as you know, the second part of my book, I divided into certain major sections, and the second section was like a crash course on money, because it's important to understand what money is and what it should be. I mean, you can say what it is, but you also should know what it should be to be good money. There's good money and there's bad money. And what's the difference? How many people even think about that? Money is money, right? You either have it or you don't. Well, there's a lot more to it than that. And by the way, as an aside, I think the fact that most people don't know much about money on the theoretical side and haven't given it a lot of thought is because it's not taught in school. And the reason it's not taught in school is because the source of the funding to our universities and our school systems really don't want people to know about this. Now, that's an extreme statement, but I think it's unfortunately very easy to document. The powers that be, if I may use that worn out expression, but it's pretty good actually. The powers that be, we might talk about who those are later, really do much better if the people of the world don't know too much about money. Because if they know about money, they might get finicky about which money they want to accept and which money they want to reject. And the people that make money, that create money, I don't mean make it by earning it, but create it by turning the printing presses or passing laws. Just by raising your hand, you can make billions. You can create billions of dollars by raising your hand. If you're in Congress and you just vote it into existence, or if you sit on the Federal Reserve Board, those are the people I'm talking about. They benefit tremendously at being able to create money. If you can imagine, if you had next week's Wall Street Journal a week ahead of everybody else, and you could tell how the business cycle was going at least a week in advance, but preferably a month in advance, you wouldn't have any trouble paying the grocery bill. This is the kind of a game we're looking at. Those who can create money are in a very advantageous position, and it's an unfair position. It really is the kind of a position that comes with monopoly. And the reason I say monopoly is because all of the fiat systems of the world are in essence monopoly systems, in that they're backed by law. You and I as individual citizens are not allowed to choose anything else in important transactions. We must acknowledge and never reject this money that the nation puts out. If it comes out from the government, we must accept it or we go to prison. Those are laws. Every country that has a money that requires force for people to accept. If your money is good, you don't have to have a law to force anybody to accept it. So whenever you see a law that requires you to accept money, it's a pretty good clue that there's something wrong with that money, but people don't think of it that way. They think, oh, well, you got to have a law to make this the money. No, you don't. If it's good money, people will accept it. If it's bad money, you have to be forced to accept it. So back to the main question, which is what is the difference between good money and bad money? In a nutshell, good money is that which holds its purchasing power. And you're not cheated out of it. In other words, you acquire, let's say you acquire $20 by 1 hour of your labor. Let's just say you're an average person or whatever, you get making $20 an hour. And so you exchange your hour of labor and you get a $20 bill. So that's the value of your $20. It's an hour of your labor. Now, if a year down the line, the $20 only buys what $10 would have bought at the time you earned it, you've just been cheated out of half of your labor.
That's some hyperinflation there, right? There's no cap
that's inflation.
on how much they can print. The Federal Reserve note versus cryptocurrency, they have that cap of how much they can.
Yeah, that's right. Because the supply is limited, and the thing that limits, there are different things that could limit good money and the supply of money. But in my view, the best thing to have the limit or to create the limit on money is labor, because that's the universal element. By labor, I mean like it takes effort to mine something out of the ground. It takes effort to create something. And so money should be backed by something that takes human effort to create. Otherwise, if you can just vote it into existence or turn the printing press, so then that gives tremendous advantage to somebody over others. And every time in history that money has been based on something that was that required human effort, that the purchasing power of that money was very stable for hundreds, if not thousands of years. For example, back in ancient Rome, if we had lived back then, if I wanted to buy a nice toga, a handcrafted belt, and a pair of sandals, I could have obtained that for about 1 ounce of gold. And the amount of human effort it took to create that 1 ounce of gold into a coin was approximately the same amount of human effort it took to create a toga, a belt, and a pair of sandals. And that was why that was the price for the clothes. It was an exchange of human labor, in a sense, hidden from you, but that's what it was. So today, thousands of years later, we come back, and if you wanted to buy, if you had a gold coin, a generic gold coin, not collector's value, but just intrinsic value, you could buy a really nice suit, a handcrafted belt, and a pair of shoes. 1,000 years later. And it didn't require any laws or any wise men in Congress or any bankers figuring formulas. It just happens because it's a law of nature, you see. But once you take that human effort out of the equation, and we'll come back to that in a minute, because that deals with cryptocurrencies too. Once you take that human effort out of it, there's something missing, and it doesn't work quite so well. It may work for a while, but it doesn't withstand the strain. It's like taking one of the trusses out of a bridge. The bridge may still stand, but it's not as strong as it was prior to that. It won't take quite as much weight, and the wind might just blow it down quicker. So a good money, therefore, is that which maintains its purchasing power. And the definition, the generic definition of money is, and this is so simple, you'd be surprised how many bankers can't tell you what money is. You say, define money. And they can't agree with each other. I prove that in my book. Some of the leading figures in the International Monetary Fund and the banking system, they go to conferences and they argue with each other over what money is. They don't know. They disagree. But anyway, the proper definition, in my view, of money is simply that it's a medium of exchange. It's not barter. Barter would be where you exchange one thing for the other. Bingo, it's an exchange. But if you have a medium, something in between, and then let's say I want that nice grand piano over there, that collector's grand piano, and I have an old Model T Ford. It's in pretty good condition. I'm willing to trade my collector's Ford for the collector's grand piano, and it's an exchange direct. But now if I have my Model T Ford, but I don't care about that piano, but I do care about that boat over there, but the boat doesn't want my Model T Ford. Now I can exchange my boat for so many ounces of gold, and then the guy with the boat will take my gold. And so I get what I want indirectly because I have a medium of exchange, not a direct exchange. So once you break free from this direct barter, now you're in the realm of money, because money is a medium of exchange where you take something as an intermediary and you don't expect to use it. You just save it until you can find somebody else who wants it. It's a very simple concept. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure it out. But now what that medium is can vary all over the map. And the medium can have its own value, like gold or silver. I mean, people do use gold and silver in industry. They use it for jewelry. They use it in utensils. So even if we didn't use it for money, it still has value to some people. That is one of the really primary requirements, in my view, for a good money, because that's how that it lasts in value. I could go into that. I have a whole about 1/5 of the book is devoted to the crash course on money, and that's just part of it. So you've got different kinds of medium.
Logical.
But it is very logical. If you just take it step by step, like most things, complicated until you realize, well, let's take the first step first, and then we'll go to the next one, and it all fits together. And as I said earlier, I'm kind of slow, but once I saw it, I thought, aha, why didn't they just say it that way,
Like,
and
click.
click. And all right, so you've got different media of exchange, and so now we talk about media. Certain media survives long term with purchasing power held, and others do not. And the thing that holds the least purchasing power is fiat currency, where it has no intrinsic value at all of any kind. And the only reason you use it is, well, the primary reason is that other people are willing to accept it. But if it loses its value and other people don't want it anymore and they want something else, then whoever issued that money has to have a law to force you to accept it. So as I said earlier, once you find legal tender laws, as they call them, forcing you and me to accept a currency, whether we want to or not, it's a bad currency because there's nothing backing it. When people say backing it, that means there's nothing that you can exchange it for automatically that has value by itself. You can back it. Now, let's say the Federal Reserve notes today. I think one of your viewers wrote in that it's backed by nothing, which technically is not true. That's not backed by an asset of intrinsic value. And in some of our views, that's nothing, therefore. But it is backed by debt. Now, what is debt? This money that we have is backed by debt. In other words, somewhere down the line, there's an IOU. It's a promise to pay. That means it's a claim on somebody's labor. That means it's backed by involuntary servitude. That's what our money is backed by. The federal government. Yeah.
Bob just wrote here, and it ties right into what you're saying. Bob Graminal, I believe pronunciation. Inflation is rigged to keep the people living paycheck to paycheck by design.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that seems to really.
Well, let me just say, yes. I'll put a little qualifier on that. There are a lot of people in this racket. Let's just call it that for the moment. That I think that's a good word for it. A lot of people in this racket that don't really care whether it keeps the people in servitude, as long as they're making out like gangbusters. In other words, if they can plunder you, they don't really care if you're in servitude, as long as they can continue plundering you. And there are a lot of people in that category. They don't really think about the plundering aspect or the servitude or the political consequences. All they know it's a good racket, and they can get something for literally nothing. And that's the primary motive, I think, for most of the people in the racket. But your caller or your writer is very correct. At the very top of the decision pyramid for all of this, those people have bigger plans than just making a lot of money. They're thinking in terms of restructuring society. They are the human engineers. They're the people you really have to look out for, because they're after you, not just your money. They want you. They want you serving them. And that's where you finally get to when you keep studying this issue.
No coincidence, again, that the Federal Reserve in 1913 was created at the same time as the income tax. Woodrow Wilson signed into office. Next thing you know, a couple of years later, that We go into war. Sorry for the noise. But that we go into. Sorry, I'm losing my focus. That we go into war, and all this money that is the powers that be make from this needless chaos and this war. It all ties together. And my father actually worked for the Federal Reserve for almost 10 years, and he quit 1 year shy of getting a lifetime government pension, 9 years. And he has since been running Taxpayers United of America for 40 years, my dad, which has helped defeat a lot of tax increases. I think it's in the millions, hundreds of, who knows, in Illinois for 40 years. So to understand how the Federal Reserve works from within, because my dad worked there for 9 years, is a very unique position. Hence the reason at 13 years of age, I'm 36 now, he handed me this book, which for a 13-year-old, it was doable. So that means you guys can read that out there as well. I really kind of got into it more when I was 17, though. My dad thought it was kind of funny at 13 to give to me to read, but so it was like bigger than me. But in any case, focusing on the solutions, you have an expo coming up this June 22nd through the 23rd, called the Red Pill Expo. Can you let everybody know what this is about? Because we know the issues. Now let's go right into how we're going to bring about the solutions. So can you tell us briefly about that and plug your website for sure?
I have a problem in answering questions, is that my mind automatically starts to rewind. How does this all begin? And I go way back, to, well, in the beginning, there was nothing, and then God made something. I don't need to go back that far, but I do have to go back a little bit to explain the reason for this thing called the Red Pill Expo.
Please.
Well, first of all, you can imagine a guy like me and yourself, you're a little bit behind in the scale and chronology than I, but you're on the same path. And there are millions of people on this same path of discovery. And at some point, we're all, I don't know where it comes from. Maybe it comes from some divine source or however you want to describe it. But for some reason, we have this, I called it the Crusader gene. But maybe it's deeper than that. We have this intuition that there's something wrong and we have to do something about it. We're not sure what it is. We just don't know for sure. And we're not sure what to do about it. But you can't just go on living your life anymore as you used to, being all preoccupied just with me, and us, our family, and so forth. You start to think about bigger issues. And so there are a lot of people, millions of us, that are driven to, we have to do something, but we're starving for information because it's being denied to us. And I know they're out there. And the question has always been throughout my career on this is, how do I find those people? They think they're all alone. They do not realize that we are legion, but they turn on the television sets and they say all this action going on, all this hatred, all this violence, all this absolute craziness going on, and they think the world has gone crazy. Am I alone? And they think they are alone. They think it's all over. Look, it's lost. It's lost. It's because they're looking at the world through their television screen, and they don't realize that powers that be we're talking about have carefully crafted the images that we see through that little tiny window. We think that little window is the whole world, and it's not. But we get the impression the world has gone mad, and it's a stage play. It's theater for the most part. Take the Antifa types, for example, and the people that are running around trying to break up everything and entice people into race war, for example, or class war, or gender war. The object is obviously just to get people fighting each other. The conquest and conquer strategy has been around for a long, long time. But you take a look at any of these groups.
It is a mass manipulation of whether it's television and mainstream media, to Hollywood, to music, to everything, in the gaming industry. It's just this mass mind control manipulation that, yes, the powers that be, as they numb us. However, voters are more engaged than ever with the recent presidential election and Trump getting elected is a good thing. I think most,
well,
not all can agree on.
Realize, well, as I said, there are people who know that there's something wrong, and so they're tired of hearing that old rhetoric again. And then when the politicians come on and start repeating their mantras that everybody's heard over and over again, they know it's all propaganda because nothing ever comes out of it. I mean, everybody's got their slogan, change or the New Deal or whatever. They put slogans on. Oh, that's good. We need a new deal. We need change. And people line up, blah, blah, blah. But nothing ever changes. It always goes in the same direction. So when people hear these old slogans and they see this old methodology, they know that that's not real. And I think that we've come to that point. It's a very good spot to be in. So they're hungry for something else. And a little dangerous there because almost anything else could be seen as good because it's not that, you see. And so we're vulnerable. I think we have to be very careful that we don't just snap at the first thing that comes along that challenges all the old order. Because I do know this.
Maybe they're hungry for something. Maybe they're hungry for a solution, Ed.
Well, yeah, but see, they don't know what the solution is.
Well, in maybe fact, it's coming.
Yeah, because most of the people that are in the forefront making the most noise saying, we want solutions. They say that too. But notice what their solution is. You can tell the tree by the fruit. What is the fruit of these solutions? It's always, always bigger government and more taxes. When you know that people are offering bigger government, more regulations, more control, and more taxes, you know they're not your leader. They're not your man. Mm-hmm. They are part of the problem, actually. And they're just the same old, but they've got a new face. And that's a kind of a litmus paper test you can use. What's their solution? Well, anyway, having said all that, the plan, here go the tree cutters again. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, well, it's all right. We push through it. We don't let anything
get in our way. Yeah.
Bring it on. Anyway. But leaders, right? A true leader creates more leaders, not followers. I've learned from Independent Ralph Nader back in 2008. I've learned from Dr. Paul and many leaders across the spectrum. So your Red Pill Expo, I feel that it's going to be igniting a lot of leaders,
now
right?
we come to the point. So how do you reach all these people that are looking for some solution, a real solution, not just rhetorical? And we've tried to do this over the years by saying, come and join this study group or come to a constitution class or, we always say, assume your citizen responsibility, get serious. And it doesn't work too well. People aren't interested in that. So I've been looking for, how do we popularize this? And then I got to thinking, that great sci-fi movie, The Matrix, it's about 20 years old now, came up with the idea of the red pill and the blue pill. Everybody knows that. It's a meme. Take the red pill and break out of the illusion, break out of the matrix and see life the way it really is. So I got the idea last year that maybe if we would change our theme a little bit and make it sound a little more popular and more interesting, we'll try the red pill theme and see if that works, because everything we have to say can be expressed in terms of illusion versus reality. It's a good analogy for it. So we tried it, and last year we held the first Red Pill Expo in Bozeman, Montana, of all places. We thought nobody wants to come to Bozeman. We went there because it's a beautiful place, and our chairman of the committee happened to live there, and he had contacts, and we got a good deal on the conference hall, which was a beautiful hall, by the way, totally adequate. And we thought maybe 200 or 300 people would show up. Wow, blow me down. 600 people showed up from 12 different countries, and everybody left saying, we want more. And so we said, we finally hit the button. We now know how to present this. So here we are a year later, and we're scheduled to have the second annual Red Pill Expo in Spokane, Washington, as you said, on June 22nd and 23rd. And what is it? Well, we bring together some of the best teachers in the world, the best faculty in the world that we can find. And by the way, these people are very well known, and some of them are used to huge honoraria, and they all come for nothing. They donate their time. It's a beautiful thing, because they know that their message, if they're really sincere, if they're really interested in change, the right change, money is not the issue, and they want to be part of it. So we have people, big hitters like Robert Kiyosaki, you mentioned him, and Richard Gage was with us last year, and we've got, well, you look at our program, you'll see a lot of big names coming, and a lot of names you've never heard of before, but they're there because they have a very powerful red pill to deliver.
And you vetted them.
And what?
And you vetted them.
Yes.
They're the real deal.
They're the real deal, yeah. The real deal. And one of the issues, just to give you an example, one of the red pills that we'll be taking a good look at this year is the illusion versus the reality of the school shootings. Everybody thinks, oh, well, what's happened to the world, all these crazy kids they're killing people, and what we need is either to take the guns away or we need more guards and everything. Nobody is really looking through the illusion of that. First of all, what's the solution being offered by the powers that be to that problem? More government, more controls, gun control, and of course more taxes to administer the whole thing. You know right away that's not the solution. What the press is not telling us is that, I'm going to go out on a limb, every one of these kids, maybe 99% of these kids, as far as I know, every one of them have been on SSRI drugs at the time of the shooting. We have people that are going to be at our conference that'll show that there have been 5,000 cases of shootings documented where the shooters were on antidepressant drugs. Right. And we'll have medical people there to explain what are the side effects of SSRI drugs. And it's right on the warning label. And two of the most prominent side effects are urges for homicide and suicide and violence. These people go out of their mind. They're driven crazy by these drugs. And these kids are loaded with these drugs. These school shootings started in about, I've forgotten the year, but I think it was 1979 or something like that, or 89. They never occurred before. Whatever the year was, I'll have to look it back up, that was precisely the year when SSRI drugs were starting to be prescribed, mass prescribed. The two charts go exactly parallel. There is no question about it that the major contributing factor to these shootings are these insane inducing drugs. Now, is this a red pill or not? You say, this is the kind of thing.
What's your domain for the Red Pill Expo? How can people find it?
Oh, it's really complicated. It's redpillexpo.org.
Less complicated when we tell them. redpillexpo.org. I should already have that memorized, to be honest.
Now,
well, I plan on being there.
And to make it a little more complicated, let me put put something after that so that it comes to my attention. It'll be redpillexpo.org/ref, REF for reference, /Freedom Force. Okay, so it's /ref/Freedom Force. It gets there either way, but I'd like to see who comes in as a result of this conference here.
I couldn't agree with you more on the gun issue, the youth. While I think it's a great thing for the youth to get involved, do I necessarily support trust that is the university system? Having recently spoke with Dr. Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich together, and Colin Cantrell, the founder of NexusEarth.com, whom is co-hosting our United We Stand Fest this April 29th at Texas A&M. Ron Paul said, so these words, they will stick with me for life. He said, the biggest threat of everything, and he paused and said, is the university system. So I still think there's a lot of great people that work within certain university systems, some not, maybe more teachers than administrators. I like to focus on the good and give the benefit of the doubt. However, there's a lot of room for improvement. So is it possible that the mainstream media, powers that be, people high up within the university system are to a certain extent manipulating, mind control the youth of children? Yes, that's a possibility. Is it possible and likely that a solution-based movement will rise within the heart of the university system to help give these students a direction of things to do, whether it's through workshops, running for office, volunteering their time, registering to vote, and being involved in helping to make sure that their vote actually is counted, because that is very feasible with technology on the horizon and blockchain voting and so on. So I am excited to learn so much at the Red Pill Expo. I'll plan on being there in person this January. I said it again, June 22nd through the 23rd in Spokane, Washington. And anybody that wants to learn about it can go to redpill.org. Right? I know how that goes, freeandequal.org. So I thank you for that. And it's just in a perfect world, yes, in a perfect world, or almost perfect world, we'll have an elections and a government that is accountable. That might result in the government being cut back, whether it's 20% up to 80%. I think the left and right can agree, at least the accountable left and right, that government probably has a lot of corruption and waste and things that we can cut back. It's just a matter of letting the people decide how much. But when that happens, I think we're going to recognize when we come together, while we have issues on gun control that's divisive, to climate control that's divisive, to the system focuses on to distract us from what Congress is doing right now. As we rise together as one nation, one world, one love, one family, and recognize that we can and will agree. We do agree on most issues across the spectrum. I do foresee peace rising. And I wanted to quote something I haven't done briefly here live from somebody I very much look up to and have studied and listened to his music for quite some time, is John Lennon. John Lennon said in a line from one of his songs, "War is over if you want it." And this can be applied to our national disaster of a political party system. The two-party system, really one-party system, puts Americans at each other's throats, when what we really need is people with principles, not people with parties. So finally, why not just walk away from it? The same way that people walked through the Berlin Wall in 1989, what is more impossible to walk through an 8-foot thick wall guarded by machine guns, dividing the world's two most lethal nuclear powers, or to walk away from a failed, rigged, obsolete two-party system and elections process?
Well, I couldn't agree more with that, Christina. In fact, as you were saying that, my mind went back to, I guess at least 20 years ago. I had decided I was going to write a book, and I was going to call it "The Party Is Over." And I never got around to it, but I got a lot of notes. But you just pretty much summed it all up. The fact is that yeah, the party system was never designed to exist in the American Constitution anyway. And as most of your followers know, that the founding fathers spoke against the dangers of party. They didn't want it. And yet we know that it's part of the human experience, it's part of human nature to join together with others of like mind. So I don't know how, if it's ever really realistic to, I think we should be free to do that. So I came eventually to the conclusion that sure, parties are a natural expression of human freedom, really. But that doesn't mean we have to give parties the ability to infringe on the rights of other human beings. And so those are where the two topics diverge. A party is one thing, but if you give the party the power to pass laws that control your life and your personal preferences, this has really nothing to do with party, because despots can do that without party. And so we finally find out we're not even talking about parties, we're talking about principles. What do people believe is the proper function of the state? Should the state be allowed to do anything that the majority wants? Or should it be restricted by constitutional limitations to the defense of life, liberty, and property? Period. Big topic.
Well put, like the words in your books and how you write and how you articulate. And I do feel you are correct that parties are over. they are a thing of the past. I read a book by Teresa Amato called Grand Illusion, The Myth of Voter Choice in a Two-Party Duopoly. She was the campaign manager for Ralph Nader in 04, 08. And I also read a book by James Bennett out of a libertarian, does a lot of stuff at the Cato Institute. In fact, many years ago, I hosted a forum there with Teresa being kind of left-leaning, Bennett on the right. And his book was to the extent of, gosh, it's downstairs and it's been a while, but how the Demo Republicans have rigged the system and left the independents out in the cold. And so I can tell you first and foremost, I have given the third parties a chance. For those who have followed free and equal elections, you're aware that Jill Stein and Gary Johnson of the Green Party and Libertarian Party did participate in our 2012 presidential debate, co-moderated by Larry King and myself. And that was the most exposure they got that entire election. And then last year, or in 2016, a little more than a year now, they both did not participate in our presidential debate. And they held a debate themselves with just the two of them, excluding other minor parties. And it was very hypocritical to say that they supported opening the debate, but they themselves were not there. And Mr. Ed Asner, who was our moderator, stated that to the candidates who did participate, that this presidential debate, these candidates have brought dignity to our election. So I have given third parties a chance. I do see, and I have seen from the inside, as they become larger, they inevitably become infiltrated. However, I do see a lot of great people still within the Libertarian and Green Party on a national and even more so statewide and even more so local level that are ready for something bigger will bring them all together. So if anything, the parties have given them some practice for what's coming, and that's a beautiful thing.
Let me throw out an idea. Supposing we just don't worry too much about the parties. Supposing we just create a movement based on principles, and the people in that movement, and that movement can go into all of the parties. Then what difference does it make? If the principles reign supreme, then let's have all the parties. Who cares? They all are on the same track, which is pretty much what happened already. All the two major political parties, it's not that they're two parties because everybody in both parties at the leadership level agree on principle. It's not our principles, but it's theirs. So that is kind of a model. Why couldn't we do the same thing? Supposing we had the principles of liberty in mind, and we said, okay, go into all the parties. Which one do you like? And what difference does it make?
And
we win. Then we win.
You inspired me, and at the United We Stand, we'll be at least launching the landing page for people to sign up, maybe the first of many phases. You can see on our phone here. It's going to be the election assistant app powered by NexusEarth.com, our co-host for United We Stand. Right. And we're going to have individuals. I know we aren't able to make it to this one, but I have a feeling you're going to be on our university tour. Who knows? I mean, where we're going to go after that, we have definitely some ideas. But imagine going onto an app and seeing every single candidate running for office be our third party's independents, where they no longer have to rely on party labels to get elected. They're going to be relying on an app that's powered and backed by a movement that's not just, okay, I've helped create it, but I'm a messenger. I'm helping to carry a torch that will be handed off to somebody else decades from now, I hope at least. And but imagine like this place to go to say, who's running? How do I run for office? How do I get on the ballot? Ooh, how do I learn more about the Federal Reserve? Let me click on this. Who's G. Edward Griffin? What's this book? How do I get on the ballot? How do I become a poll watcher? Register to vote through headcount or rock the vote, like super, super interactive. And this is going to also implement blockchain voting. So blockchain voting, I think, could be a pretty cool solution-based direction in helping to bring about not only accountability within our elections, but also technology. That's going to be the next very important thing, if not already. So I'm excited to come to your Red Pill Expo, June 22nd, finally got it, 23rd in Spokane. Washington, again, that's the redpillexpo.org and all that.
/ref/Freedom Force.
Thank you for that. And did you have any closing remarks to inspiring the people to get involved, and maybe about United We Stand, if you would like. I know Dr. Ron Paul is you inspired him to write the book In the Fed. I am aware of that. I mean, that's a world-renowned book. I also have on my shelf downstairs. And so if you could wrap up and have some final words for our audience, that would be wonderful.
Well, yeah, it's a good thing I don't think about this too long in advance, because I'd be too confused. But the thing that comes to mind right now is are two thoughts, and we've already talked about them earlier. There are millions and millions of people, not only in America, but around the world, who know that something is wrong. They just feel it. You can see it, but you don't understand it, because information is being denied to them to fill in the blanks. So it's our job to help reach out to those people and not be too harsh on them, because I put myself back. If somebody had pulled up the truck, pulled the lever, and dumped on me all the information that I now have. I used to try to do that, by the way. I'd try to awaken somebody. Listen, let me tell you about this. And I'd pull the truck, pull the lever, and I'd dump them with all this information, and I'd never see them again. Too much. We have to be cautious that we don't overload people, because it's a big red pill to take. So the first thing, I think we have to just
noted.
Be aware that people are hungry for this information. And the second thing that comes to mind is that I am delighted to see that you, with your project, your voting project and everything, is not just technical. It's based on principles as well. Because you can create a wonderful voting machine that everybody can vote for, but if the wrong people are still, let's not say the wrong people, but if people are still not getting the right message, they're going to vote the wrong way with the highly advanced technical system. And I'm really delighted to see that you are aware of that. And it's not just, you care how they vote. You're not going to tell anybody how to vote. That's how I feel. But I care intensely how they vote, what their principles are. Because if they believe that if the group is more important than the individual, and they're willing to sacrifice individuals in order to accomplish this so-called social gain, whatever that is, I worry about them, because I don't want them determining my political future. So anyway, those are the two thoughts that I thought about. I'm encouraged by these two things, that the fact is people are awakening. They know there's something wrong. They're hungry for information. And people like you and many others, and I'm doing my best, is to make the public aware that principles are important. It's not just technicalities. It's not just personalities. It's not political parties. It's not whether it's left or right. It's the principles. And those are my two closing thoughts. Those are the two most encouraging things I see on the horizon right now.
Well, principles, heard. I very much hear you. Ed, you know that we're Free and Equal Elections. We're headquartered in Cambria, California for about 6 years now. And I'm excited that you're going to be out here in the future when it works with scheduling to really help be involved on a local level, to speak to people here in Cambria, like Ed Asner did last year, moderating our candidates forum. Really, I do feel it was a factor of many that helped result the incumbent president being replaced by a guy named Harry Farmer here in Cambria, whom I find, though I don't agree in all his viewpoints, he's accountable. He listens to the people, and there's no one that controls him. And so one down, 4 more to go. And when we do that on a local level, and I'm excited to have you here in Cambria, and I thank you so much for your time. I see Bob wrote this beautiful note here. I cannot. He says, thank you, Mr. Griffin, but he wrote, I hope parties are over. The two-party system in place today was created to divide the people. Time to bring the people together. Bob, yes, united we stand. I hope all of you can make it there. And I want to end on this final note, that instead of what people call revolutionary change, I am going to propose here at Free and Equal Elections and for United We Stand an alternative called rapid evolutionary change, which rapid evolutionary change requires that we, the people, recognize that we only need to do what we already have the power to do to almost instantly change the world for the better. So much gratitude, Ed,
I'll
for your
salute
time.
that idea. You bet.
And so I really appreciate it. It's about taking personal responsibility for every violation that we see around us, both of the people and planet. And I can go beyond that, but also just don't say it's coming from someone else. Accept it as your own, because only then you will strive for its correction with the necessary understanding and compassion for the true violators. They are no better nor worse than you. Really, they are a part of you. And to embrace them, and you have embraced yourself. When you embrace them and when you reject them, you reject your power to change the world. So here's to changing the world together, Ed. And thank you for your support.
Thank you, my dear, and good luck to you on your project. I wish I could be there, but maybe next time.
Well, I know, I feel that, and I hope Dr. Ron Paul can make it. I'm hoping to see him in Texas next week. So Carol's been emailing me, his wife, and she's like, send him a text message. I'm like, all right, I'll text him on his cell. He does text message, Dr. Paul. It's pretty cute. So, so thank you for you, Paul, and so many for your work. And I'm looking forward. We hope to share it to many more through our online store with Free and Equal in the future. So I'll be in touch with you about that too. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Goodbye.
Lots of love. Bye, Ed.